I mentioned Psalms to you recently, and we talked about our favorite Psalms and the ideas of the Psalms and the themes that they have going throughout that entire book. And probably the other more important book that we can talk about that is so different from the rest of the Bible is Proverbs. Because much like Psalms, there's not really a theme throughout the book. And so there are a lot of people who have looked through Proverbs throughout the year. And I remember when we studied it at school, we studied it very briefly. It was a difficult study. You know, you're jumping all over the place.
Right.
And so all of us that know about the Bible have read Proverbs before, and we have a favorite, more than likely. Maybe multiple favorites. But what would you do if someone asks, what's your favorite proverb?
My favorite proverb, there's probably several that stand out. One that I'm reminded of regularly would be Proverbs 15:3, where it talks about the eyes of the Lord are in every place, and He beholds both the evil and the good.
Right.
And the reason that one stands out in my mind is because, you know, we need to realize it gives us comfort as Christians to know that the Lord knows what's happening around us, and we're not out here by ourselves. And it kind of defeats the old deism idea that God just set things in motion, created and set things in motion and walked away from His creation as if He doesn't care. He does care, and He does know what's going on around us, and He is certainly in control. And so that's one that kind of reminds me regularly, you know, that the Lord is in charge, and certainly God knows what's going on around us. We're not out here by ourselves, and we're not out here fighting the battle out here by ourselves in that way. And so it's probably a good one for a reminder of encouragement. There's another one that comes to mind as well when I talk about when I'm reminded of looking for passages of hope and things like that. Then you have Proverbs 13 and verse 12, hope deferred makes the heart sick, but when desire comes, it's a tree of life. And so that hope can bring about, and he refers to it as a tree of life. And so it's life-giving. You know, that hope kind of sustains us and keeps us moving forward and everything. You could probably go on and on this way. There's right. A lot that stand out. You know, the fear of the Lord passages, Proverbs, are ones that are probably special in that way because those are a lot of the ones that we preach right. on a regular basis. And so there are a lot of those in the book of Proverbs as well. So,
well, it's interesting, you know, like we said, there may not be an actual beginning Proverb 1 with a story continuing all the way to Proverbs, you know, the end of the book. But there are snippets of the book where the writer, most likely Solomon, is going to sit there and say, you know, here's what I want my son to know. And here he is in Proverbs 4, and I love what he says in verses 1 through 12. He's talking about, hear my children, the instruction of a father, give attention to no understanding. Why? I'm giving you good doctrine. Don't forsake my law. Right. When I was my father's son, tender and the only one in the sight of my mother, he also taught me and said, let your heart retain my words, you keep my commandments, you get to live. You keep commandments and you live as a result of that. So get wisdom, get understanding. Don't forget, don't turn away from the words of my mouth. Don't forsake her. She'll preserve you. Love her, she'll keep you. You see, wisdom is the principal thing. It's the most important thing. So get wisdom, and in all you're getting, get understanding. Exalt her and she'll promote you. She'll bring you honor when you embrace her. She'll place your head an ornament of grace. You'll place on your head an ornament of grace. A crown of glory she will deliver to you. Hear, my son, receive my sayings, and the years of your life will be many. I have taught you in the way of wisdom. I've led you in the right paths. When you walk, your steps will not be hindered, and when you run, you will not stumble. Yeah. So just those 12 verses, because it's not, he keeps going, right. But just those 12 verses gives us a ton of wisdom. And, you know, Proverbs, we say, is like a pithy statement. It's a statement of great wisdom. And in this passage, he's talking to his son about what wisdom will do for you. And I can't tell you, Wayne, how many people I know that died too young because they weren't wise about what they were doing.
True.
And when he says there, you get wisdom and you live, and wisdom is the principal thing, and if you receive my sayings, the years of your life will be many. I think about children who don't listen to their parents about certain things and go off and they do lose their lives younger because they didn't listen to the wisdom from their elders. They didn't listen to the wisdom from people who knew better. Right. And here's Solomon saying, I've been here. I know what I need to be doing. I know that you would be wise to not go down the same path that I did. And I think it's so interesting that we study the life of Solomon, and we look at this idea of he was such a wise man, but I could also make the statement he was one of the most foolish men too in his relationships, because he had multiple women. And as wise a king as he was, he made one of the most critical errors in that he had too many women vying for his attention, and some have even suggested that vying for his attention could have potentially caused him to have been lost, because we have no real record in the New Testament, especially in the book of Hebrews, in that Hall of Faith chapter, he's not mentioned. Right. Now, I don't know for sure that he's lost, but it's an interesting argument to make that Solomon himself, one of the wisest people ever, is trying to tell his son, you need to be wiser than even I've been. Right. Listen to me. I've been around a time or two, and we have all those dad sayings that people have sometimes said, when I was your age, I did this, or, back when I was this, I've been there. I've lived your life. I've been in your age. And we hear all this, and then you read the book of Proverbs, and you find the same things being said to his son, trying to give wisdom and give understanding. And so that, to me, is my favorite, is the idea of verse 11, I have taught you in the way of wisdom. Really, I look at that as the way that God could look at us too. God can say, I've taught you what you need to do. Now it's up to you to do it. And same thing that the son is being told, hey, if I'm not going to do it, it's not my dad's fault. It's mine. Right. If I don't follow after the wisdom, it's not because I won't have been taught. And Proverbs 4 is not the only place where we find him begging his children to not forsake the law. Right. And that, to me, is so important. Why is it important to, look to the book of Proverbs in the sense of preaching? If we're going to preach sermons, what is really the benefit in the book of Proverbs for us? Because it really is all over the place.
It is, and these short, pithy sayings. This is a book of wisdom. It's considered wisdom literature, Hebrew literature, in that way. And the Hebrew proverb, sometimes our English word proverb brings about a little different idea. The Hebrew proverb seeks to instruct in what is good and upright in the whole of one's daily life, and to present the theme that there is no true wisdom apart from the faith in the one God. And so that's very specific. And what I love about that idea, when it's defined in those terms, to seek instruction. Of course, Proverbs 4 makes that clear. You're seeking wisdom. Right. It's the principal thing. Get that. And I think that for us as preachers, we're looking for wisdom, but also we're trying to help folks find that truth, to help find what is good and what is right. And of course, many of the Proverbs have to do with morality, in some form or fashion. Not all of them. Some of them is just about good living versus evil living, wise living versus foolish, and so, and there are different types of Proverbs, and we can get into that if you want to, but I think that the book of Proverbs, the way that it opens, kind of sets the stage. And we even talked about this in the Psalms, that Psalm 1 kind of sets the stage for the whole of all the Psalms. Right. And so in Proverbs 1, beginning in verse 2, to know wisdom and instruction, to perceive the words of understanding, to receive the instruction of wisdom, justice, judgment, and equity, to give subtlety to the simple, to the young man knowledge and discretion. A wise man will hear and increase learning, and a man of understanding shall attain, he says, unto wise counsels, to understand a proverb and the interpretation, the words of the wise, and their dark or hidden sayings, is what he's talking about there. And so the point of this is that it has practical applications for godliness and every kind of relationship that we might be concerned with in our life as well. Whether it has to do with our responsibilities unto God, our family, our children, in other words, parents to their children, children to their parents, our neighbors, how we respond to our neighbors, how we live with our neighbors, even citizenship is kind of dealt with. Wisdom for citizenship is dealt with in the book of Proverbs as well. So there's a lot that's here, and so it packs a big punch, if you will. kind of covering a wide variety of topics for us. So as preachers, a lot of times we go here and we're able to find a wise saying that goes along with maybe whatever it is that we're teaching,
right,
that week or whatever we're preaching on that week. And so I think there's that connection by that way.
Why is there no flow really to the book, in the sense of, we don't have this, let's talk about wisdom first, and here's all of the Proverbs about wisdom. Now let's move on to doing the things that we need to do with money, because Proverbs do have some Proverbs in the book of Proverbs about money.
Right.
And so why is there really no flow, it seems, to the book?
Yeah, I think that you can find themes, but to see that from one chapter to the next, an actual flow is really hard. You could almost, it might be easier to break it down by the my son passages.
Right.
Maybe easier, to kind of paragraph it in that way. But I would say that because it is short sayings, and so you're getting, maybe under a chapter or a section of the Proverbs that are dealing with this specific thing. This is what I want you to know. Here's a bunch of things that you need to think about. And sometimes what we'll find is within those, you'll find a proverb that basically deals with young men dealing with women. And you'll find another section dealing with other things. But you'll also find there in those proverbs, the wise will do this, the unwise this. And so sometimes they're kind of antithesis, if you will, right. Antithetical would probably be a better term there. Thinking about, here's a statement that's made, and then here's the opposite of that.
Right.
And sometimes that's not always the case, but a lot of times that's what we're getting. So we're getting wisdom. Here's what the wise would do. Here's what the unwise do. Yeah. And then sometimes you'll get, here is wisdom. Reach for it. Get all that you can.
Right.
And so sometimes you'll have a stretch that all seems to flow together, and then sometimes it's one verse that stands alone, another verse that stands alone, and so it's hard to say that it's hard to see a flow in that, because they are these short, dark sayings.
Yeah, I remember being a little boy, and the house my grandparents were living in at the time in Arkansas, a power line had fallen down, and it was on the ground, and my grandfather had come into the house and told us to not go outside for a little while, just to be safe and to make sure that nothing would happen to us. And I decided that I needed to tell them something, and really it was probably an excuse just to go out there and see what was going on. Mm-hmm. And I got outside of the house and I walked onto the yard, and my grandfather said, "Get back in the house and you go read the book of Proverbs." And at the time, I didn't really understand what he meant by that, because he said, "Read the book of Proverbs." And I said, "Which one?" He goes, "All of them. All of the Proverbs." And so I sat down and read every last proverb. And remember at the time thinking, I don't understand why I'm reading this. And then now as we talk about it, and of course I've eventually got the lesson when he told me about it, but the lesson was, be wise.
Right.
Don't be so foolish to go outside when we're telling you to not do that kind of thing. And my coworker Ryan, who I am privileged to preach alongside every week, he has a daughter that is getting a little older, but when she first, came into the Somerville area, she was only about 2 years old. And she would do something and fall down and hurt herself a little bit, and he would just kind of look at her and say, "Natural consequences. Don't do that next time." Mm-hmm. And then every time she would fall, he'd just say, "Natural consequences." And she eventually learned, you know what, if I don't fall, I don't get hurt. Yeah. And so she kind of wised up herself, and that was the whole point of it was, right. I'm not going to tell you that, I'm going to show you that you need to be wiser in this way. And that's really what the whole book of Proverbs is about. And I made the mistake earlier. It's Ecclesiastes that Solomon probably wrote. We know he wrote Proverbs because it starts off, these are the Proverbs of Solomon. Yeah. These are his words. But I want to talk for just a moment about the idea of that virtuous woman. And I think it is so amazing to me that a man who couldn't pick just one virtuous woman is the one that is going to take the time to really give us the best blueprint for the best type of wife that we can find.
Sure.
And that is something that if you look around all of this mindset that Solomon has given to us, and we study Proverbs, we find all these Proverbs. Here's this virtuous woman. What can you tell us about the virtuous woman?
When you look at Proverbs 31 and you start kind of breaking it down and you look at, Proverbs. Hey, where am I at? There it is. You know, you've got this woman who is so, she loves her husband.
Yeah.
And you see that's brought out in the passage. You have also her work ethic. She runs a household.
Right.
She runs a business.
Right.
And you know, in all of that, she stands out in a way that is absolutely amazing from the standpoint of all that she accomplishes. You know, and all of us probably, you know, want to say, you know, our wife is the Proverbs 31 woman. You know, we would all, you know, want to see that, you know, and our wives certainly strive for that goal. The same as we look at other passages that teach us how to be the men that we should be. And so, you know, here again was King Lemuel, it says.
Well, yeah.
Then very, very likely.
Right.
You know, this is probably Solomon as well. But,
right.
But we'll just say King Lemuel, who's writing this, and you know, he's saying, you know, son, I want you to look for these kind of qualities in a wife. And I think that's special. And if it is the case that he has learned this by the fact that he has gone the other way from this, and now stands, here's an opportunity to be able to teach. You know, I think this not only stands out as an opportunity to teach a son, but it's for every son. Right. This is what every dad really wants for his children, to find this kind of woman, you know. And you know, it talks about the fact that she's known, you know, for her work's sake, for all the things that she does, and she's not afraid of even bad weather. I mean, she goes, and even the worst of times, she goes and gets things done. She is a worker. She's diligent in what she does. And what I find impressive is that at verse 23, he turns around and says, you know, her husband's known in the gates. Mm-hmm. Why is he known in the gates? He's known, okay, he's well known probably because of his work, but also because she is caring for these things and doing her work. And there again, this kind of Proverbs kind of sets us up so that we understand there are roles for both men and women. Mm-hmm. And while she is a worker, she accomplishes so much in her household, she also runs a business, evidently, according to these verses. Right. And so she perceived that her merchandise is good, and so she runs some kind of business here. So she's taking care of things in that way. But she is a benefit and a blessing and a helpmeet proper to her husband. Right. And by that, he's known in his work. He has an opportunity to excel in his area of expertise, whatever it is. For him, it's being there as one of those in the gate. Right. And so maybe we'd think of it like city council, something, you know, here's an opportunity for him to serve in the community in that way. And now he gets that opportunity to do it. But it goes on, she opens her mouth with wisdom. I don't think that should be lost on us at all, because this whole book is about wisdom. Right. And so it says that she opens her mouth with wisdom, and in her tongue is the law of kindness. She is a special kind of woman who, her words are kind. Right. And she cares for people, and that comes out in her work. The work of her hands shows the strength. She's a strong woman as well, evidently. Shows her strength and honor, her clothing, and she'll rejoice in time to come, but she opens her mouth with wisdom. So when she says something, it's wise. You need to pay attention. And I think that speaks a lot to her. Her children rise up. They call her blessed. Her husband, he praises her. And so, you know, when you think about this, and it says, many daughters have done virtuously, but thou, this woman, excels above all. And so this is something for the son to be on the lookout for. Right. You know, this type of woman. Now, he doesn't know what she's going to be able to accomplish, but the kind of character that she has leads to this.
Right.
And so I think that's important. That's what he wants for his son. And again, whether he's learned this the hard way or not, I think it's great wisdom, and that's what this book is about.
Right.
But I think it's important to note, because it says, favor is deceitful, beauty is vain, but a woman that feareth the Lord, she will be praised. She's the one that's going to be praised. And so there again, her own works praise her in the gates. That's how it ends. Mm-hmm. Well, that's special. His name is known in the gates, but she also is known in the gates. Why? Because she's a special kind of woman. Yeah. She has found favor with God. Right. That's where her mind is set. So I think that's important in all this. At least those are just kind of a quick overview of Proverbs 31, the virtuous woman. Right. There's a lot that could be unpacked, obviously, in that. But that's certainly a favorite of many, and rightly so, because it should be a goal for every man who seeks a wife. Yeah. So.
Well, I'm definitely not getting who wrote what right so far today. I'm messing it up left and right, but I'm just, even if, like you said, even if this is just King Lemuel who's written this, Solomon would have been wise if he had listened to it.
No doubt. If
he had applied these principles. Yeah. And what I'd like to touch on for just a quick moment is we have people today that want to suggest that it is sinful for a woman to work outside the home. But a virtuous woman seems to buck up against that teaching, right? That it is absolutely sinful. Yeah. But I think the balance that has to be found there is she needs to be able to also be a keeper at home.
She cares for her house.
Exactly.
There's no doubt about that.
But she's able to not just have her merchandise, but it says also, in verse 24, she makes linen garments and sells them. She supplies sashes for the merchants. Yep. And so she has a business, and at the end it says, let her own works praise her, and let her own works praise her in the gates. That's not just talking about the stuff she does at home. Yeah. Dorcas was one that was known by many widows because of what she had done for them by getting the clothing to them that they needed. Right. And it seems the virtuous woman was very similar. Yeah. And so we've got this proverb about being a virtuous woman, and I feel like we're doing a disservice to some of our women today in a time where economically we're needing more women to work in order to make ends meet by telling them that they'll be wrong if they do. Right. And then we want to get up and preach on being like the virtuous woman, and she was one that worked outside the home. Yeah. And so we've got to find that balance and understand that as long as the mother is able to keep the home, she can do both, can't she?
Yeah, I think so. And also, we have to be mindful, because every couple of situations is different, and maybe especially before children are in the home, what a wonderful time to work together and to kind of build for that opportunity. Then maybe she can be home, with her children, because I know a lot of mothers want to be home with their children, but that's not she can still care for her children and work outside the home.
Her children rose up and called her blessed. Yeah. And so she still commanded respect from her children and gained that respect.
Yeah, she gained that. So, and I think that's important. And a lot of people will differ, on that back and forth. Should a woman work and, be outside the home and work and those kind of things. And that's, the problem is binding that. Right. And so, we have to find what works best in each family. And if each family is doing what they can to be pleasing unto the Lord, who are we to turn around and say, well, she's wrong for working outside the home?
That's right. Now, what about someone who would look at the book of Proverbs and say, well, we obviously can't cover that in a 13-week class. We obviously can't cover that even if we preached every Sunday for an entire year. We couldn't cover all the wisdom that's in there because of how much you said there is to unpack. So we should just never study it. It should just be a book that we keep to ourselves and study at home. We should never really have sermons from the pulpit on it. Classes shouldn't be, themed around it. What would you do if that was a statement made to you?
Maybe a new proverb would be, he who studies not the book of Proverbs is unwise.
Right.
That would be foolish.
Right.
And so, when you think about the book of Proverbs, because there is so much here, yes, it's hard to unpack in a 13-week class, Bible study like we would normally arrange for by a quarter. Right. But there's much that we can study. We can study it by some of the themes that are found here. Man's duty to God, and those can be broken down in a way that we can study that. And that may take a couple weeks to cover, but man's duty in the home, to the home and to his children, and the direction that he would give them, and all of those things. So we can study the family. We can study even civil government, our duty and our responsibility to our neighbors. I mentioned those earlier, but those are ways that we could study and cover a good broad portion. I'll tell you another way that this can be studied. The book of Proverbs, good friend of ours with his 3 boys and his wife every night, and we were in their home, and they said, we're going to have family Bible time, and so we were there, and it was amazing to see those young boys sitting there learning, proverb by proverb, and learning to quote them as well as learning what they meant. They were studying them together. And I just thought that was amazing and a wonderful way to accomplish a study. This is really a good family study. It doesn't have to be bound by a 13-week class, 1 hour at a time or 45 minutes at a time. This is something that needs to be read. Years ago, I had one of my mentors encouraged me to read the book of Ecclesiastes every month, and I've not always stuck to that, but I have tried several times a year at least. I'll sit down and I'll just read through in one setting. Just go read through the book of Ecclesiastes, and the book of Proverbs is much the same way. It's a hard read straight through.
Right. Yeah.
However, it is 31 chapters,
right.
And it's so you could take a chapter a day in a 31-day month, and in the month of January you could read all chapters of this, and begin to then put together what all is in there. And that's what I find interesting. If you read it in that fashion, then you say, okay, well, in this chapter, these are some of the things that are covered. In this chapter, these are some things. And so it kind of lets you find what you're looking for. When you're looking for some wisdom dealing with a certain topic or subject, you can go find that because you know something about where it is, and that all comes back to regular Bible study. Yeah.
Well, in truth, we can't study the whole Bible in 1 year in a church-like setting. Right. In a Sunday morning, Sunday evening capacity, it would be incredibly challenging because you've got the entire Word of God to study, and so that argument, well, because we can't study it in a class, because we couldn't get through it in a whole year, let's just not do it, would mean that we would let a lot of things fall by the wayside. Yeah. And so we're not able to do that. So there has to be that happy medium. And I love the point you made. There's 31 chapters. And many months have 31 days, and the months that don't will just double up on the last day.
Just do an extra.
Yeah, just do an extra chapter. It's not going to kill you. And I love the point you mentioned that for family Bible time, this is a perfect thing because sometimes people might say, well, I want to do family Bible time, but I don't know where to go.
Yeah.
Here's a perfect place.
This is a great place to start.
Proverbs is so full of wisdom, and families would be wise to have that in their home.
Absolutely. One of the things, too, in just a second or two, this provides wisdom that is also found in the New Testament. Much of it's covered there as well.
Absolutely.